At the end of each podcast episode, I'm going to recommend a podcast that somehow or another ties into this episode. So please listen to the whole episode of the podcast because I guarantee you, the podcast I recommend you're going to love. A couple things I need to tell you about right away. So with HartfordCountyLiving.com, when I created that, one of the goals was to help local businesses, I guess, build themselves up, get the word out about them. And that's one of the things I've been able to do since 2012. When I started the podcast in 2015, that was another goal. I wanted to get more people on so they could talk about their business, tell their stories, let people know about them, and also, make connections, connect people to other people. And with Hartford County and with Rich Bennett, I was able to do that as well. Now, conversations with Rich Bennett, the same thing. I mean, that's what I want to do. I just want to get people's stories out there. I want people to hear about all these businesses, these nonprofits, all the work that people do, and to introduce people to others because it's something that, I don't know, that's just me. That's something I've always wanted to do. And it just so happens that on this episode of Conversations with Rich Bennett, I have a gentleman on. I had him on before. He was on Hartford County Living with Rich Bennett a while ago. And since that time, he's done so much. And I can honestly say I'm very proud of him. This gentleman went ahead and started his own podcast. He is now actually, when he started, he's a professional podcaster. He's still learning the ropes like I am, but that's the one thing about that's about business, period. You never stop learning. Never. Podcasts have changed so much, and it's, you'll hear about it. But I'm honored to have him back onto the show. Kind of surprised him. I think he thought he was coming in to co-host the show, and it's like, I want to play catch up. But I have Brad Cox, who hosts his own podcast called Mouthful of Graffiti, the MOG. And on this episode, we're going to talk about the situation with the trademark of his band that he went through, I believe record label as well. And we're going to talk about podcasting. We're going to have a lot of tips and advice for people. And if there's anything that we don't cover that you would like, to ask us about, email me. Email Brad. I'm sure, either of us will be happy to answer it. So sit back and enjoy the conversation.
Coming to you from the Freedom Federal Credit Union Studios, Hartford County Living presents Conversations with Rich Bennett.
Come on.
You're faster than me.
Guys.
We've been
I got a
together.
fake on mine. It's 24th and 13th.
Oh, man, you already said it. I was going to ask her if she remembered the date. Sitting here today with a gentleman that I had on, Hartford County Living with Rich Bennett a year ago?
It was about a year ago.
About a year ago.
It was the summer. I remember it was the summer.
Was it the summer?
Well, it was the summer when you released it, so it may have been a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
But since that time, he blames me, but since that...
I do blame you.
Since that time, a lot has happened. And, we'll talk about that. But I have Brad Cox back on again, author, musician, and now a professional podcaster.
Somehow.
What other hat are you wearing?
Well, I work a full-time job.
Well, that too, yeah.
I'm a husband. That's a job.
I didn't say that, Lisa. You're right, though. It is.
It's a job.
I can say that. My wife doesn't listen.
Well, I mean, we've been together for 25 years, so it's not like it's a hard job. We actually get along very well. So
you guys have been married for 25 years?
Well, we've been married since 2002, but we've been together for 25 years.
Oh, okay.
We were living in sin for a while.
I was going to say, man, you're a lot younger than me, though. I mean, because we're getting ready to celebrate 25 years.
Yeah, but it's been, we met, she was 17 and I was 19.
Okay.
So
5 years ago.
Yeah.
25, really?
Yeah.
Damn, Brad, I thought you were in like your early 30s.
No, I'm 44.
You don't look it, man.
I'm starting to get jowls, though. I didn't have jowls. This time last year, I did not have jowls. And I actually got one of those things that you chew on that's supposed to strengthen the muscles in your face.
Yeah.
And I think I just messed up my TMJ or TMG, whatever it is that like messes up with the muscles in your mouth.
I don't know, man. You're all talking Greek to me. I don't have no idea what the hell you're talking
Yeah, well, anyway, I started developing jowls. That was like the first sign
What
of-
exactly is jowls?
It's like when the skin around your cheek starts kind of falling down a little bit.
Oh, where it looks like you have almost like Droopy the dog?
Yeah, Droopy the
Okay.
dog. It's just
I
subtle.
thought that was just an age thing,
No,
man.
it's just started. And I've noticed with age, if you get older and you stay really thin, like I'm trying to stay thin, but
Mm-hmm.
if you stay too thin, you start looking kind of like gaunt, like Steve Buscemi, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to look like that, but you also don't want to pick up the the weight as you get older, or not too much anyway.
Why you gotta look at me when you say
Look
that,
at
man? Hey, look, I get paid for that weight.
By the way, I'm loving the sweatshirt here.
Oh, the Hartford Fight in the house?
Yeah.
You know, because my daughter goes there.
Yeah, I do
Hartford
the
Community
ticketing for their
College.
events, so
And I was like, I gotta have the swag.
gotta have
Because
it.
my wife has it, my daughter has it. They never got me anything.
Yeah.
So, was it last or the first semester? Took my daughter up. First semester of this year, took my daughter up to get her books, and we had to pick them up in the store.
Right.
And I was looking, I was like, man, they got some nice stuff here.
Right.
So told my daughter, I said, man, I'm gonna have to go back up there again and get some stuff. So second semester, I guess, is that what they're in now?
Well, yeah. I would,
Yeah, whatever it is. So, anyways, I said, yeah, I'll take her up there to get her books. And I was going through the racks. I'm like, man, it's like but I had to have something with the owl on it. I love the owl.
So every job I've ever had, there's a pint glass. So in my basement, I have a Baltimore Sun pint glass. I have a Patch.com pint glass. And you would think that Hartford Community College, being college students, would have a pint glass, but they don't want to. I don't think they want to condone the drinking. I guess I don't know that, but I'm like, you guys need a pint glass. These kids would gobble pint glasses up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that really they don't have.
I have not seen one. There might be a coffee mug or something, like tumblers or something like that. But
Yeah, well, certain beers don't taste good in a coffee mug. I mean, it just
Right.
they don't have. All right, they need to get that taken care of.
They do. As a merch and marketing person, absolutely, you've got to get pint
They
glasses.
should do a whole. I mean, colleges in general, not just the pint glasses. Do all. Well, I don't know. In college, they probably don't do all the different beer tastings.
I can understand not having like a beer bong or a funnel or something like
Well,
that.
yeah, but no, you have your pint glass, you have your Belgian glasses, for your different styles
Right,
of beer. I mean, I know the Marine Corps does that.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
I would buy them. Now, I could be speaking out of turn because this is when I started there. They didn't have them, but
Right.
Maybe they have them now. But I remember like going up there specifically for a pint glass, and I was like, "You guys don't have a pint glass. Come on."
Wow.
Yeah.
So if they don't have them, who do we need to talk to fix that?
Probably the college store.
Well, they
manager.
probably won't listen to you since you work there.
They won't.
All right, so I need to call.
Yeah, call up and say I need a pint glass.
Yeah,
But
they'll have other people
put
call.
Screech the Owl on there, and the kids would
Man,
love
that
that.
would, not just the kids.
Yeah.
I think everybody
Well,
in
yeah,
the community
yeah.
would.
Anybody that's going to college there would like them.
Yeah, and the thing is, they could make so much money off that. I guarantee you, the breweries around the county would probably carry them.
Yeah,
Man,
All
you're
right.
on to something here.
I might be.
I think you need to start running the store there. Okay, so
It's another hat to wear.
yeah, never mind. Don't run the store. All right. So the last time you were on, we were talking about. I hope I don't get it wrong. Schizocalypso. Schizocalypso. Would I say Skipto?
Skipto. That's okay.
Schizocalypso.
It's a terrible band name. It's my terrible band name.
I love it though. But you were going through. You couldn't really talk much about it because you were going through.
A trademark lawsuit.
The trademark lawsuit.
Yeah, so we ended up winning the lawsuit. I mean, it was really nothing to win. It was a matter of going through the process in the
Right.
sense that, like, the law it's first in commerce, not first to file. So he filed for a trademark in 2015. We've been around since 1998. He couldn't win the case.
Right.
But to go through the process, that gauntlet, that legal nightmare, it took us 4 years. It took me about $6,500.
Jesus.
But I did it on principle, really, because it was like, I reached out to this guy and I was like, look, man, we've got members of this band that are not alive anymore. It means a lot to us. It means
Right.
a lot to the fans and friends and family that the music stays out there. And he just wrote back, yeah, man, sorry. I was like, okay.
And what was he
That's what
doing
we're
with
doing.
it?
He's a rap guy out in Los Angeles, and at this point, the term schizo is there's so many bands at this point, but he was bullying not just me. There was other bands. I found like 4 other bands. He was just taking their music down. They weren't interfering with him, but he was just going after them.
Wow.
And so I connected with some of them, and I was just like, somebody's going to have to stop this at some point.
Yeah.
Because I had to re-release all the music under another name. I released it as Modern Day Travesty because I just thought it was still kind of like the rhyming words, but it was very topical to what was going on. And but it was like nobody could find the music. Nobody was looking for Modern Day Travesty. So at some point, it was like right near the tail end when his trademark would have become almost an incontestable status had 6 more months gone by.
Really?
And it was basically like, you're either going to do this or you're not, Brad.
Right.
So at that point, I was like, we're doing this. And that's what we did.
Wow.
And we
ended up winning. Good.
Yeah, it wasn't hard. We actually filed for summary judgment. We won that. He didn't get a lawyer until we won. And at that point, it was like...
Kind of late
in the game. They filed a request for reconsideration, which was just, it was meritless. It was to basically buy time so we could negotiate. He offered to pay me out. I declined because my feeling was, yes, this is a good chunk of money that you're willing to pay. Mm-hmm. But after that first payment, because it was going to be over like 9 months, who's going to enforce you paying me?
Right.
The lawsuit's over, you've gotten what you wanted, and now I've got like a down payment on something you're not going to come through on.
I guarantee it wasn't going to cover your costs anyways. And what'd you say, $6,500?
Yeah. And plus, like I said, it really wasn't about the money. It was like, if he was allowed to keep this thing, he could continue doing this to other people.
Right.
And it was just so unnecessary. So
now that you have the trademark, you have the name back, you can use it legally.
I can.
What's your plans now with it?
Well, the cool thing about it is that, in a sense, him taking all the music down is allowing me to go back and re-release either remastered versions of these old albums. Because there's like old albums, I'm not even sure if I still want to re-release them because I was a kid, that's not even like the greatest stuff.
Yeah, but still, man.
So I'm putting it up, and I'm putting it back up slowly, and I'm kind of cleaning it up. Like some of the, the song beginning and end points, remastering the songs, giving the songs... Like back then, we didn't have the technology to really give a good face.
Right.
So a lot of the artwork was kind of shoddy. It looked like, somebody did it on their home computer. So we're giving, like the original artwork as it should have been. We have like all these old files of like what the album covers could have been.
Wow.
So I'm pulling some of that stuff to give the fans like, oh, this is what the album cover was intended to be, but they didn't have the technology to do it. So it's kind of cool.
Good thing you didn't get rid of all that stuff.
No, luckily I didn't for the lawsuit.
Yeah.
Do you realize how difficult it is to go back and try to like flesh out the timeline? Because the internet's only going to get you back so far. It's going to get you back to about 2000, but we started in 1998. But unless you held like old flyers or so I had to go I had to get a bunch of affidavits from people in other states. It couldn't just be people in Maryland that bought the CD where they were shipped to. I had P.O. Box records because I've had the P.O. Box. Actually, I've had the P.O. Box since like 97. But going back and finding old people that duplicated stickers that were going on the albums, they were still around. They still had the order. T-shirts from like 1999.
Holy cow, man!
Yeah, like what's the place there on Main Street? It's not a Bright Idea. I always get it mixed up. It's
the marketing place?
Yeah, it's Bob Titleman's place. Skylight.
Yeah.
They had the T-shirt orders, the original T-shirts from like 99. So they were able to pull the records, but like it gets a little bit tricky. But all we really had to do was prove that we were before 2015, which that was easy.
Wow.
I mean, you could just literally, we spent $6,500 for a couple judges or lawyers to do a Google search. All you had to do was do a Google search.
Right.
Be like, well, here's an article in the Towson Times from like 2003, or here's show listings at the Record Theater from 2002.
Man.
It's like, but I had to go through the gauntlet.
Yeah. Holy cow.
Yeah.
It was worth it though. Sounds like it.
It was so awesome just to see that red X. Well, it's not an X; it's a circle with the line through it on his trademark. I would have paid $6,500 just for that. Just like it was awesome.
So, how many albums total were there under that?
13.
Holy cow!
Yeah, that was just.
And you had to take all them down originally.
He went after 3, and then I thought, okay, well, we'll see how this goes. And then a couple months later, he went after 3 more, and it was just like a domino. It was like every time he did it, it was like, are you going to do this or not, Brad? You're going to have to stop this if you're going to stop it.
So now you can sell them again. I guess a CD, you go and vinyl as well, or just CD?
Really, I'm just getting them up digitally.
Okay.
I mean, I could sell them, I guess, the physical copies at shows, that kind of thing.
So just going to do like Apple, Spotify. What else is out there?
Yeah, basically
Pandora.
Pandora. Yeah, everywhere pretty much the podcast goes.
That's I didn't even think about that, except for YouTube.
So the podcast doesn't go to YouTube. You're right.
No, not yet. I think they're talking about an RSS feed.
Yeah,
we'll see how that works. We'll get into that later.
Yeah.
All right. So the Schizo Calypso is doing good. And
yeah, we're doing a reunion show on April 15th.
I was going to ask you about that.
I don't know if this will be out by then, but like April 15th, we're doing a reunion show down at Zen West with Prison Wife, Old Man Jones.
Is that Towson? No, it's Baltimore, right?
It's Towson.
Okay.
And Dana Denise. So we're excited to do it. It's kind of weird, though, because our last show was with Buck Cherry back in 2019.
Wow.
That was in 2019, though. And the band, like, we all got together in the same room. It was like, we're all looking at each other like, do you remember how to play this? Do you remember how to play this? Because it's been a while,
I bet as soon as you sat down to play, everything just came back naturally, though, didn't it?
Kind of. It's really weird, though, because the first practice was solid. The third practice was like, what the hell's going on here, But I think what it was
some people had a bad. Was it on a Monday?
No, but it could have been just a bad day. But
yeah.
I also think that you start dialing into the songs. At first, you're just happy you can play them.
Right.
The third time, you're like, well, they got to sound good. So you start getting into that boat.
So you guys are going to be playing Zen West. You got any other things lined up?
That may be the last show. Yeah, we're talking about doing some other things, and I wanted to put Veteran Avenue together and take that out. So
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if
there's just we got 2 guys filling in for one.
Okay.
The other 2 guys that I've been playing in Schizo with, since the early 2000s, or late 90s. Those guys, they want to go in a different direction. They want to do something else musically, not more in the cover realm is what they want to do.
So let's say when you guys play Zen West, if everything goes over well and you have fans saying, "Oh man, you guys got to play again,"
it'll happen. Yeah,
we figured as much.
I've had some people up in Harrisburg like reaching out like, "Hey man, like you gonna come up here and do a show?" I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
And then I started putting the pieces in place to do that, and I don't know what'll happen. But I think you're right. After I think they get off the stage and they feel that, they might be like, maybe we should do a Virginia show and a PA show and just kind of do it.
Yeah.
To whatever degree we can.
Like a last hurrah tour or whatever.
Yeah, like do a 5 to 10 show run.
I mean, Kiss. I mean, look at all these bands that done how many farewell tours?
Right.
So, who says you can't do just
That's
one?
right.
So, all right, and Veteran Avenue, you said you're going on the road with that, or
hoping to, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a project that's got 24 different Baltimore-based musicians in it. So basically the idea was I would typically write the song, and then I would kind of like look for different people to play on the song. Like if it was a blues song, I might reach out to like a Todd Boyle or a Brian Rumley to come in. Or we talked about this on the other show. And just over the course of, almost 4 years, we put together these 18 songs and put it out. So that just came out March 3rd, 3/3. So
okay.
Yeah.
So now, as far as books go, are you working on another one?
That is a hat that I've not put back on.
Okay.
I don't have time. Like the podcast
I was
is enough.
Say, all right. And speaking of the podcast, so Mouthful of Graffiti, which I love the name, the MOG. Where in the world did you come up with that?
That was the name of the second We Love the Underground album. And it was just basically this idea that we all have these walls, these social media walls, and we're always just running our mouths and splattering all this, content onto these walls. And I just thought we're just it's a mouthful of graffiti. It's what it is.
I love it.
And that's where it came from. But it also seemed like it would work with a podcast too.
Right.
So I started first trying to find like different album titles that I could kind of like piggyback on to kind of like, I don't know, bring those themes in. Like I have an album called Between the Lines and Beyond the Static. So I was thinking about the Between the Lines podcast or Beyond the Static podcast but all those were taken. Like every name I could think of had been taken for a podcast. and Mouthful of Graffiti was original enough that that one wasn't
Who did
taken.
the artwork for that?
The Mog?
Yeah.
David Weston Gregory. You mean the skull?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is awesome, man.
Yeah, he did a great job.
I love it. All right, so I talked about this briefly before we started, or in the beginning, and I'll let you put the talking about how you blame me for the podcast. So tell everybody the story there.
Yeah,
I don't know why you're blaming me.
No,
I mean,
it's a good thing. It's a great thing. We did the podcast together, like you said, about a year ago, and at one point you had offered to help me do a podcast. You're like, if you ever want a podcast or co-host or whatever, I'd be happy to help you. And I didn't think anything of it in the moment.
Need to blame Lisa. That's what it is.
Well, she's partly to blame too. Actually, she's a lot to blame. So I guess as I was driving home, it was starting to marinate because I've been playing in the local music scene for 24 years. I was like, wow, I know a lot of people, and this could be something to do. But then I kind of departmentalized it and just kept singing along to whatever I was singing along with. And then I got home and I told Lisa, I was like, yeah, he was saying I should probably start my own podcast. And she's like, you should start your own podcast. And I was like, well, I'm not doing a podcast. I don't really even know where to start with that, because I was a little just intimidated by the gear and how do you do a podcast?
Well, I know when you had come in for that podcast, at first when you sat down, you seemed a little nervous.
I was.
But it's like after a while, you seem so relaxed and you were a natural at it. Yeah. And now you are.
Yeah. So I did the first podcast, and after doing the first one, I was like, that wasn't so bad. Mm-hmm. And then, things like the editing software, those were daunting things. Like, well, how do you take the audio file and, like, I should know this as a musician, but, like, and put it over here and edit it. Like, what kind of software do I need? And Hindenburg is fantastic.
Oh, I love it.
I didn't even hesitate to buy the full package. Best $129 I've ever spent.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it's because I was using Audacity for a while, and you're on Buzzsprout, right?
I am on Buzzsprout.
Okay, and then Buzzsprout had the Hindenburg deal, which I kept wanting to buy. I kept putting it off. Well, then World Radio Day, and Hindenburg offered even a bigger discount. It's like, you know what? Let me just do it.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's so intuitive.
Oh, so easy. I love the auto levels, the magic levels. It's just, and having to, like your intro and everything, if you keep the same one, you can just store it. Oh, it's great. It's great. I don't understand why more podcasters aren't using it.
I mean, the only thing that I have to typically recut is the news blurbs, because they time out.
Right.
But other than that, I'm just sliding the file in. And I do spend a lot of time editing, probably more than I should. Like an hour podcast, I'll edit for about 2.5, 3 hours just to... I get like all the dead space out. I take out a lot of the ums. I'm starting to stop doing some of that.
Yes.
Because I do want more of that natural feel. But, live and learn.
Yeah. Well, and it takes time. I mean, I was doing it the same thing. I was taking out all the ums, all the background noises. And when I go back and listen to some of those early episodes, first of all, I got to laugh at them. But then I'm like, why did I take all that stuff out? It just doesn't sound real. If you're having a conversation,
right?
I mean, think of it, and this is the way I look at it. So if I ask you a question, a deep question,
and you answer right away,
yeah, it's like that's not natural.
Right.
It's like it's scripted,
right?
But if you put
it's funny that you say that.
You think about it.
So the very first couple episodes, it was so tight like that.
Yeah.
It almost sounded like I pre-recorded the questions and then put their answers in.
Right.
I was like, that's too tight. You know what I mean? Like, so I've found pretty much a good balance, But I will send it to the guest, because sometimes people will say something where I'm seeing your body language and you're seeing mine, and it makes sense in context. But if you take it out of context, it could get them, jammed up. So I don't want anybody to be like reluctant to promote it, because it's like, oh, well, I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought about that.
Because you want them to promote it,
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
obviously. So tell everybody what Mouthful of Graffiti is about, first of all, because yours is completely different from
Yes.
mine. I'll speak to anybody. You have the. Well, that was I mean,
limited my
nothing
market.
against you, Brad. But no, to me, everybody's got a
Yeah.
story. But you have a particular niche that you do, which I love.
Yeah.
Tell everybody what it is. And
It's
it makes
basically-
sense for you.
Yeah,
too.
it's basically creatives in the Mid-Atlantic area. I speak with authors. I speak with musicians, photographers. I would speak with people that do art, like paintings, that kind of thing. Really no limit.
Artist.
Yeah, as long as it's creative, it's welcome. And the sponsors or any of those people, obviously I'll bring them in. I chose and reached out to sponsors that would make sense, that would pair with music or literature in some way. Like
Right.
I didn't just randomly pick like Churchville Kitchen and Tile because that doesn't really have anything to do with art. Well,
Yeah.
I guess it could. See that there's
Well, the tile, yeah.
yeah, it could, but you know what I mean. I try to like pick breweries or music stores,
Right.
Or, bookstores. So
Now, well, of course, you got a marketing background, so for you, that wasn't hard.
no, I
to
knew
do
all
to
the
go pitch
context
it.
from the Baltimore Sun.
Yeah.
yeah.
Because I know a lot of podcasters today, this has been a pet peeve of mine. And I'm sure you probably belong to some of the groups on Facebook. Everybody's always asking, how many downloads do I need before I can monetize my podcast? Yeah. My answer to that, 0. Other people will say, oh, no, you need at least.
No, you will get people asking.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you had sponsors before you launched your first episode.
I
didn't you?
did, and that was
as did
yeah,
I.
it was a bit of a leap of faith. I think that people were trusting the fact because of my background that I was going to push this and it would be successful. But Vagabond Sandwich Company was the very first sponsor, and he wrote the check without ever hearing an episode. He didn't even ask about metrics. He was like, "I'm in." He's like, he knew.
Yeah.
But then there were sponsors where it was like, well, how many streams does it have? What is it? And I get that because there's so many different podcasts. What makes yours special? Why are you special? They didn't know me from anybody.
Yeah.
So, those people I had to kind of finesse a little bit. I had to get a couple of episodes out there.
Right. So the one thing and first of all, I want to tell you how proud I am of you about the podcast.
Thank you.
Because you dove right into it. And you went out there, you got the sponsors right away. You basically did everything the same way I did. And it has become, a business.
It is.
I mean,
To some
anytime
degree,
you have a sponsor paying you, it is a business. And like me, you're still learning from it. I'm still learning stuff. I don't think that will ever end because the way the podcasting is growing now. I looked this morning before we came here to record, and as of now, there are over 2 million podcasts worldwide. Podcasting is
ours are the best.
Well, yeah, of course. Well, hey, that shows you just won Harford County Living Choice Awards for favorite local podcast.
That's true. Yes.
So
there are a lot of great podcasts in the area.
there are. Actually, have you been on Stephen Williams yet, the Main Street podcast?
I haven't, but I've heard it's a really good one. It's similar. It's similar in nature to yours? Or?
Similar, yeah, similar to mine.
And then there's the Zen Setter, and then Candace Minix has one. I can't remember what it's called, but they do one for like mental health, which is killer.
Which one's that? I've had a Lolly on.
That's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That isn't Candace his sister.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
So Candace wasn't on, but Ed was talking about it. That's a good podcast.
Because I wanted to go on there and talk about Schizo Calypso, the premise of it, like the whole mantra, because I thought it would really tie it nicely with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, definitely. But no, there are a lot of, and that's one of the things.
I say Zen Setter.
Yeah, Zen Setter.
Yeah.
That's
Sophia Musto.
Sophia, yeah.
She's great.
Actually, she was supposed to come on the podcast too. I don't know what happened there. You're seeing a lot more people coming out doing podcasts.
Do you think? Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah, that's why it's called Conversations with Rich Bennett, man. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you, one of the things that I realized in doing it was that podcasts, especially for the local musicians, seem to be kind of taking the place of like your old like radio local shows, like your local radio shows, I should say, like your Noise in the Basement or your 97 Underground, those kind of shows where they may still do it in some capacity, but it seems like this is becoming the outlet now for local musicians and artists.
Yeah, the only difference is because Matt Terry does Fresh Tracks. on the college
He
station,
does,
on
yes.
WHFC. So
Love that.
the big difference with that is if you're doing the podcast, and we talked about this when you and I recorded the first time, playing the music on the podcast, you have to have the rights not just of the band and the songwriter, but you got to get the rights from the producers and all that.
Yeah.
So there are some podcasts that are out there doing it. Not as many. And I think that's where radio is still going to succeed because the radio stations already have that license and everything.
No, I think radio is great. Actually, in terms of marketing, it's one of the best outlets at this point,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
But in terms of those shows, I don't see as many of those shows. Like, I don't see Noise in the Basement anymore. It's just gone. You know, it's sad. But
some of the radio stations will have that as a podcast. And
Will
have
they?
It, yeah, and have it
Okay.
on their website. I think what they should do is have it as a show too on
Yeah.
the radio station because I can understand, and I've talked to a couple of people from radio that, you know, like if my podcast, they asked me if I would be interested in putting it on the station.
yeah.
Well, I can't do that because what's the difference between doing a podcast like mine and being on the radio or even yours? Because yours, you have no set time limit.
Right.
So you can't do that on radio.
No, you'd have to pre-record them, obviously, and keep
It
it
cut
within,
out a lot of stuff.
Yeah, keep it within 45 to an hour or whatever they
Yeah.
want. Yeah.
And to me, that's take away a lot of the good content. That's one of the reasons I stopped. Because when I started this originally, I started doing it at the radio station, recording there.
Yeah.
But I think most of the good content was during commercials.
Yeah.
And it's, I think you'll still have your regular radio shows like BAL's got C4. I think they still have C4.
I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't listened to talk radio in a long time.
It's been a while.
But with podcasts, your biggest niches right now, music is one of them. True crime. Oh my God.
Conspiracy theories.
Yes.
Yes.
And some of your interview shows like Rogan, Jocko, who's the other one? Tim Ferriss. Pat Flynn's got a lot of great, but Pat Flynn, the difference between Pat Flynn and somebody like Rogan and Jocko is Pat Flynn can do a podcast by himself and no guest. Whereas somebody like Rogan wouldn't be able to do it. I don't know. Maybe Rogan could.
That's a lot of extra work there.
It is.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of guys that do it. It's when I first got into podcasting, two guys I really followed was Daniel J. Lewis, who does it by himself, and Dave Jackson. So it was the Audacity to running lips here. The Audacity to Podcast, that's Daniel J. Lewis's, and The School of Podcasting by Dave Jackson. Learned so much from those two. And now Buzzsprout, of course, they have all their stuff too online, but it's great. So somebody that's getting into it, because a lot of people think they can, and you still see this, some people just grab their phone and record on there.
I know.
And they'll use, I ain't going to mention the names, but those free
Yeah.
hosting companies. What advice would you give them?
I would say do the homework. You do a very good job of holding a conversation without having like notes in front of you.
Right.
But I would
Thank you.
suggest to anybody actually starting out or trying to do it to do your research and to have questions ready. Mm-hmm. You don't have to read the questions verbatim, but just have some questions in mind, or at least have a list of talking points. So you're not staring at the person, that uncomfortable silence ensues, and then you start panicking, and then you really can't think of anything to talk about. So
Dead air. Sorry.
Yeah. So, do your research, know that it's going to take some work, and also realize that you don't get a second bite at the apple. So your first 2, 3, 4 episodes, they better be dynamite. They got to be really good. You can loosen the reins a little bit as you go, but you're going to have to impress people out of the gate, and then after you do that, you can dial it back a little bit, And also realize that it's like anything else. It's tenacity. Tenacity's king. So in terms of branding, the MOG is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger just from existing. Mm-hmm. So a year from now, the MOG is going to have probably 125 episodes out there, and people will just know it, and they're going to want to be a part of it because the brand.
Right.
So
see, the good
tenacity.
thing, one of the things I like about yours, you can go back and listen from the first episode.
Yeah, you can.
You know, it's great conversation. Those are the type of podcasts I like, where you can go back and listen to from episode 1 all the way up to episode 1,000 or whatever, you know, because there's good content out there.
I would also say the thing that we talked about pre-podcast is to make sure you're putting out content regularly. Mm-hmm. You know, once a week, get your schedule. Do not miss a date because people will start tuning out.
Right.
Yeah.
And the worst thing you can do, if you know you're going to miss a date, on the next podcast, don't apologize. Act like it never happened.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people mess up too.
People aren't paying as much of attention as you think.
Yeah.
But they will notice if you apologize.
Yes. Oh, yes. Absolutely. So with your podcast, and I've had a lot of people ask me this.
You look like you're struggling to figure out how to ask it.
No, it's something I'm not really looking forward to doing. I still don't know if I'm going to do it. I probably won't because it's just I'm old school. You know, podcasts originally were called Netcast. Because of Apple became podcasts and all this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was the old
Netcasts.
MP3 players before Apple brought out the iPod. People were doing podcasts. There weren't a lot out there.
Yeah.
But they were doing them. Video. Any plans on I know it's a lot of work because now that's separate editing as well.
I won't personally do it. I've
Okay.
considered going up to the podcast studio in Maine, and I did do one episode like that. And my Zoom episodes are video.
Okay.
But I believe that the rate up there it was a little pricey. That's why I only did one episode up there. We did the first episode for free to test the studio out.
Right.
And I was going to get a deal to do like a certain amount a month. So it's a beautiful studio on Main Street.
Right.
The gentleman who offered me that deal is no longer there.
Oh.
So I'm not sure if I would still get the deal. So I've kind of teetered on the idea because it is a cool environment. And when you leave there, basically they got in the back, there's 5 cameras.
Right.
And they got this little like board that's got all 5 cameras on it. And they just, when one person's talking, the guy just hits the button.
Okay.
The camera goes to that person. And when the thing's said and done, it's edited. They just give it to you. It's great. Just it has to get within the price point, but I would not attempt to do it myself. No, I would not.
It can't be that expensive. I mean,
But it might be.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know on average with video, most of your podcast studios are charging like $65. So anywhere between $45 to $65 an hour.
Oh no, this was in the ballpark of $450 an episode for an hour.
Ooh,
Yeah.
wow.
And then
Okay.
they actually brought me in and they were open to hearing my thoughts on it. And I told them, I was like, that's priced too high. If you want somebody that's going to do regular podcasts, you're going to have to get it into the $150, $200 realm.
Yeah, and it's got to be somebody that's got their podcast monetized very well.
Right. And who could afford to do that. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Actually, let's take a quick break and talk about our sponsor, the Chesapeake Podcast Network. The Chesapeake Podcast Network, or CPN, is a collection of podcasts that are somehow tied to the Chesapeake Bay area. So whether the location where the podcast is recorded is in the Bay Area, or even if the host lives or is from the area, it can be added to the network. So if you're a podcaster and you're not on the Chesapeake Podcast Network, it's simple to get added. Just go to ChesapeakePodcastNetwork.com and you can go ahead and, well, you'll see to follow us. And all the information's on there. The phone number, 443-982-0250. Or you can email me because, yes, I run it, rbennett@HarfordCountyLiving.com. There are so many great podcasts on here. Brad's podcast, of course, is on here. Mouthful of Graffiti, The Mog. That's one of them that's on here. Mine, Conversations with Rich Bennett, is on here. You have the Main Street podcast, which you heard us talking about. That's on here. Some other great ones that you're going to hear on the Chesapeake Podcast Network is, of course, The Dream World. That's one we just added. Podcasts from the Harford Community College. Zen Setter. Chefs Without Restaurants. And, of course, Truth and Levity with Jordan and Candace. So, again, go to ChesapeakePodcastNetwork.com. Look at all the great podcasts. give them a listen. Granted, you're not going to be able to listen to them all in one day, but take a year or two and check them out. Let's go ahead and get back to the conversation.
But it is a beautiful studio.
Yeah.
I'll show you like a little video clip of what it looked like. The only issue I had with my episode was they forgot to turn one of the mics on.
Ouch.
So you can't really tell, though, which is nice.
Yeah.
But basically, my mic was off. So everything that they were hearing was coming through my buddy's mic.
Oh.
So, well, obviously, it wasn't a directional microphone because it picked me up pretty well. But, you know.
Wow.
But they were just learning, and the
Yeah.
room wasn't treated, so everything was bouncing off the walls. And
Oh, they didn't have the cushions up there?
This was early on, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, I got to get that shed done, don't I?
You do. You could do it. I would say if the Zoom setup was in the ballpark of $500 to $600 with the Hindenburg and
Right.
There's I don't know, $1,200 to $2,000 to have a good audio or audio video setup.
All right, so you mentioned something too before we started about Zoom.
Yes.
And the sound quality.
Yeah.
Okay. And I go ahead.
I was just gonna say that there's, even if you've got your setup sounding good, if theirs sounds bad, it's going to sound bad.
Right.
And I do take the audio file and I do slide it into like just an audio version of the MOG.
Right.
So people can hear it. But I also put the video up so people can watch it. But like I just did a band from Southern Israel, which
I heard that one. Yeah, that was good.
It was cool. But
that was through Zoom?
It was through Zoom.
Okay.
But it was only going to sound as good as it was going to sound.
Yeah.
So
well, the thing with Zoom, and this is something I found out. So the bit rate's not as good as say Squadcast or Riverside.
Okay.
It sounds like you're on the telephone.
Is Squadcast like a Zoom?
Squadcast is just like Zoom. That's what I use all the time whenever I'm doing virtual.
Right.
Something that Squadcast added is the option to do video as well.
Okay.
But yeah, Squadcast, the bitrate is different, so you're getting that quality sound. You also have the ability to, when you download the files, you can download it as WAV or MP3.
Right.
But it stays up there. I think I'm paying like
I had an audio guy come
$10
over
a month.
And we were trying to figure out how to do like phone conversation podcasts.
Right.
Because I have some friends in California that I want to get on the show. And at the time I was like, I can't figure it out. Well, he came over. He couldn't figure out the Zoom either. And he's an audio guy.
Oh, the Zoom live track.
Yeah.
Oh, you have that. I thought you meant Zoom, the internet thing. Oh,
So
okay.
I was trying to figure out like, how do I get the audio out off of that from the phone call? So there's a plug-in.
Right. The cord, the TSS cord, right.
And I just couldn't figure it out. I got frustrated and it just like, I'm just doing Zoom calls for now. So that's what happened. So that's why I'm not on Squadcast yet.
I did one episode where I plugged the phone in, and it was actually pretty easy. You just have your input select up there to determine which one it is. Now, if you're using a phone, they need to have headphones on, and you should have headphones on. Otherwise, you're going to get the feedback.
Okay.
That is always going to cause a problem. And for those of you that are listening, we're not talking about Zoom like in Zoom meetings. We're talking about the Zoom Live Track L8, which is the board that we use for mixing.
Yeah.
But anyways, when I recorded that one, it still came through, and this is what scares me about cell phones. The quality, it is that phone quality, no matter what.
Right.
You're going to get that. But at times I could hear her phone cutting out. So she was losing reception. So a lot of the important things that she was saying got cut out. That's the second time where I recorded an episode and I couldn't put it up, which is a shame. And
it is because it's so much work. And
that was I got to get her on it. I've had her on before. That was with Becky Titleman.
Okay.
And I felt so bad. It's like, man, this. But that's unfortunate. That's one of the things that happens.
The only thing I'm afraid of with the Zoom 8 in front of you is that I will get to the end of the interview and think I push the mute. Well, I think I push the record buttons, but really hit the mute buttons.
Oh,
I've done that when I'm trying to cut the intros.
Yeah.
So I double, triple, quadruple check. But yeah, that's always my fear, that I get to the end, I've got a great episode, and I didn't record it.
Well, one of the things I got to give you credit for is that you do something that I haven't figured out how to do yet. You got the horses and the chickens and everything else in there.
Yeah, so That's part of it. So you can go to YouTube and you can pull down some like free copyright-free samples, and that's what I'm using. And it just started out off as a joke, really.
Wait a minute. So you don't have them programmed into the live track?
No, I add them later.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought you had it programmed in and hitting the buttons.
That'd be great. It'd be perfect.
You can.
I'm sure you can, but that's not what I'm doing.
Oh, okay. Never
I
mind.
have
I take back what I said. You didn't figure it out before me.
No. I have an audio folder of sound effects now.
Okay, yeah.
And I just, like if somebody's talking about, it's been a really long time, I'll put the eagle like flying, or whatever.
The only sound effect I've used 2 sound effects so far. So I had Heather.
I don't think your podcast would make sense with a lot of sound effects.
Well, it was as a joke.
Okay.
So I did a podcast with Heather, Angela, and Kate from the Chamber.
Okay.
And at the time, and Heather was at home, but they were doing construction in her house. So you could always hear like them banging.
Right.
So even during the recording, I said, "Oh man, I gotta have fun with this. I'm gonna, So you heard the banging, and the effect I put in there was "Open up, FBI." So that and Joe Ayler from Tar Heel Construction.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were had to laugh my tail off. Joe does a lot of podcasts with me, and we were recording one with Joe Conroy of I think it's Hartford Retirement Planners.
Okay.
And somehow or another, the subject came up about bad days or whatever. And Joe started talking about how he got up in the morning, went down. It was that morning that we were recording. He went downstairs. The dog went to the bathroom on the floor. He stepped on it barefoot, but he was dropping the F-bomb and the S-bombs and all that. So it's the first podcast episode where I ever had to put in the boop.
So I put that in there. Yeah. So I was doing that episode, like I was saying, with the Doties in southern Israel. And I was talking about like the unrest in that area because they're right between Syria and Egypt. And just to the east, it obviously gets worse. So we were talking about that, and just like on cue, it wasn't even a sound effect. They were having fireworks going on outside. And he's like, as you can hear, it sounded like bombs were going off in the background.
Yeah, that was pretty wild, man.
Yeah, those guys are cool, man.
Oh, they are. They are. How do you find these people, by the way?
That guy, so I reached out to Bumblefoot from Guns N' Roses, and I was like, well, he was the former Guns N' Roses guitarist, and I was like, hey, man, I just kind of like a Hail Mary. I was like, I'd like to have you on the show. We met in Vegas, and he's like, hey, man, I'm really tied up doing studio work right now, but I'm producing this band. And he introduced me to the band, and it wasn't like I like this band because the association with Bumblefoot. This band is good.
Right.
Like they could be like the next Nirvana type of band.
Oh, wow.
And I started like really like listening to their music and getting into it, and they were also just really super nice guys. So they had a new record coming out. I was like, let's do it. Obviously it's Mid-Atlantic. Well, Bumblefoot is in Upper New York, so that's my connection to the Mid-Atlantic, and that's his band that he's producing. So
see, I think that's another place where podcasters, I don't know if they get scared or what, but you hear them all the time. A lot of, how do I get guests? How do I get guests?
Yeah.
You just said it. You ask.
Yeah.
It's simple. I mean, some after a while they'll come to you.
I've also deliberately, I've chosen the path of incrementally working up. I will not bring on a guest that I'm not ready for yet.
Right.
So, just, and I also want to keep it local. I don't want to just start getting only big fish because it's for the small fish too. So it's for all fish.
Yeah. That was a problem I was having with mine because it was focused strictly on businesses in Hartford County.
Yeah.
But then it grew, and then I started having people from other parts of the country contacting me, authors and all this. It's like,
yeah, you start getting overwhelmed with the inbox.
Yeah.
And you can't get back to them
I'm like,
all.
well, wait a minute, but it has nothing to do with Hartford County. And then somebody said to me, they're like, Rich, people in Hartford County read.
That's true.
I was like, oh, yeah? They're like, just because they're not here in Hartford County doesn't mean it won't benefit somebody here in Hartford County.
So to that point, there's been guests that have reached out that have nothing to do with music whatsoever, but they want to be a guest and they're a business in town or something like that. So either A, we try to find a tie-in, or B,
which is sometimes hard.
Yeah, or B, I'm going to try to basically do like mini episodes that will be kind of like a wedged in sponsor with a guest.
Right.
So like maybe you get like 25, 30 minutes with the guest, 5-10 minutes with the sponsor of that episode, and then 20 or 30 more minutes of the guest again, just to find a way to let these people still have an outlet, because they want to be on the show, but there's no tie-in whatsoever.
Yeah, that can be hard at times.
Yeah.
Too, because you don't want to lose your listeners that you have now.
Right.
And with your podcast, and I know you focus on the Mid-Atlantic.
Yeah.
I think you've already done it in a way. You can go worldwide.
You can
with this. With the background you have in music and writing, I mean, just art in general.
Yeah.
There's so many great people out there that you could talk to. But, and, like with mine, I think one of the biggest compliments I got was I've had a couple people that have moved here from out of state, and they said they wouldn't have known about Harford County if they didn't hear my podcast.
That's awesome.
To me, that was like one of the biggest accomplishments I could have made with the podcast, which is, Christy, right, Breslin?
Yep.
Okay. So did the podcast with her.
I feel like she's always here. You take so many pictures of her at the table.
Yeah. So she came in to record the podcast with me. The first words out of her mouth, and this is when it was Harford County Living with Rich Bennett. First words out of her mouth was, "Do you have an agent?" I'm like, "Well, what, for my DJing?" She goes, "No, for the podcast." Well, no, why would I have an agent? She goes, "I think you need to go nationwide." I said, "Well, technically, in a way, I am. It's like the World Wide Web." So she goes, "No, drop the Harford County Living, change the name. You need to expand because you're already talking to other people that aren't here in Harford."
Small town living or something like that, yeah.
I said, you know what? You're not the first person to tell me that. I've had a lot of people tell me that. So I put a thing online. First, I contacted my sponsors and asked them if they were okay with it. One sponsor said, "Well, Harford County Living, that's your brand." I said, "Well, Harford County Living, the website is the brand.
Right.
Technically, the podcast isn't." And then I put a thing out to the listeners and asked for suggestions. Mm-hmm. Some of the weird names for the name of the podcast, I had like the Richie Rich Show and stuff
there
like
you
that.
go.
I was like,
Silver spoons, man.
Yeah, I'm like, no. So that's when we decided on everybody liked conversations with Rich Bennett because that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So to please a couple of the others, so it's Harford County Living presents Conversations with Rich Bennett.
Yeah.
But it's because of you
all right,
that also gave me the idea, because one of the things I noticed with each one of your episodes, you have the MOG logo there.
Yes.
One of the things I want to do, and you and I talked about me wanting to, since my other plans fell through for the podcast studio I wanted to do originally, put the shed in the backyard. I already have the neon signs that say Conversations with Rich Bennett.
Do you really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you can. I didn't know you can order them online.
And they can say anything you want?
Yes. You got to get it for the MOG, man.
Well, now I am.
I'll have to send you the link. But I figured this way I could that can always be in there.
That's awesome.
Because, with Canva, I could take your photo and then still put you, even though the sign ain't here, put you in front of it.
Right. I love that, yeah.
Yeah, so that's your fault for that
all
one.
Right.
But, so you all heard me mention a podcast studio. So the plan is, and I talked to Brad about this a while ago. So originally, my brother-in-law has a restaurant that's sitting empty. Years ago, now I'm going back probably 3-4 years ago, my plan was, and I took the business plan to him, was to make it a podcast studio / unique coffee shop because he had the liquor license.
Right.
So somebody went in, they wanted a Mexican coffee, they got a true Mexican coffee. You have regular coffee too, and I would have 6 separate podcast studios that would be soundproofed and 1 stage for live podcasts. Needless to say, that plan fell through. That's not happening. So somebody came to me, told me I need to put a shed in my backyard. And that's the plan. That's what we're going to be doing eventually.
That's awesome.
So Brad will have a place to record as well, because you're recording in your basement now, right?
I've been doing it in the basement. I have a basement bar. I just got the mic set up, and that's it.
Okay.
Yep.
So I told Brad, once I get it done, then anytime he wants to use it, and this is my plan to do with other local podcasters if they want, to give them a venue to record. Some people are still recording in their closets.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of hard. But
let me ask you this question: have you thought about bringing in other? I've thought about bringing in like a second person to do mogs. Like I'll give them the audio files, and then they could slide the interview into the place. So it would be the mog with so and so, the mog with so and so. So you could get more episodes out there, more content going, more like fanfare and hoopla around your brand. Because there's, like you said, like your inbox is like filled with people that you cannot get back to because you can't, be everywhere at the same time.
Wait, so you mean like a producer or
no? Like,
I might not be following you.
Well,
here.
what I'm saying is like instead of like Brad doing every single podcast or Rich Bennett doing every single podcast, another person that you trust that's going to do a good job, to also be doing the podcast. So it wouldn't be conversations.
Oh, not a co-host, but somebody like if I'm sick or whatever. Then
like Harford County Living, not conversations with Rich Bennett, but Harford County Living with Christy Breslin or you know what I mean? Like where it could actually like they could just do the interview and then like on Sunday night when you drop the episodes, you're dropping 5 episodes or 6 episodes. You're really drumming up that content.
No, I never thought about that. And I guess the only reason being is because I just love doing this.
I was in a conversation yesterday.
It's not a bad idea.
No, I was talking to this guy in Ohio yesterday. He's like, you know what, man, you should have a mog in Ohio. We were talking about having a mog in like
so
California.
Franchise it.
Yeah. So
oh my God, a franchised podcast.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
Man, you better trademark that sucker real quick, man, if you haven't already.
Well, yeah, it would just Mid-Atlantic would be like, it would be the West Coast mog. Or there'd be the Midwest mog or, Yeah,
that's not a bad idea.
I've already got the trademark going.
I still think you could do it worldwide already.
Yeah, you could.
I mean,
But you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. And once you get Hindenburg down, if you keep it as just a regular podcast and not, video, but I think you're growing it, and this is something I've actually been thinking about. You're growing it enough to where you could get a separate producer.
Yeah.
Which is going to take a little work off you. Send them the audio files,
they edit it and send it back.
Or because that's one of the things I've seriously been thinking about doing. And actually, you and I have the best place for that, especially you. Get interns.
Yeah, that's true.
From the college to do it.
There was actually an old college tech buddy that I was going to actually send him the files, but I was still being very just OCD about the way it sounded. But if I can loosen the reins, and there's not anything in the episode where it's like, we got to take that out without being too specific and finding it, I will just send the audio file, pay the $40, and he said he'd send it back. Yeah,
I mean, that's cheap.
But right now, we're doing all the work.
And I'll be honest with you.
This is the fun part.
This is the fun part.
Right.
And one of the things I do like doing is when I sit down to edit it, and it does take time because I'll listen to the whole podcast. Now, as I'm listening to it, if I hear something I don't like, then I'll cut it out.
Yeah.
Which Hindenburg makes it so much easier to do. And then, so once that part's done, I'll save that. Then I'll record the intro. Then I'll go ahead and do everything now with. The only difference is now with this, with Conversations with Rich Bennett, something I did with Harford County Living with Rich Bennett, at the end of each episode, it was already saved. So it was the same thing over and over again. What I'm doing now with Conversations with Rich Bennett, at the end of every episode, I'm coming on and telling I'm recommending another podcast.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Now, of course, on this episode, I got to recommend Mouthful of Graffiti, the
Absolutely.
mom. It only makes sense. But I think that's just another way of there's a lot of good podcasts out there that people don't know about.
That's true.
Because if you look at Apple, you look at Spotify, the top of the list is always the same ones. It's those big national ones.
Yep.
The ones that are paying $1 million too. But there's so many good local independent ones like yours, like the Main Street Podcast, and some others, and Ed and Candace's, that it's hard for them to get the word out there.
Yeah.
And I figured that's another way I can do it, which is why I also started the Chesapeake Podcast Network to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing that.
Well, one of the things I got to do now is go through, and because I noticed this 2 days ago. I'm going through everything, and there's some podcasts on there where there has not been anything uploaded in 2 years.
So it's not really a podcast.
They're not doing anything anymore. So it's like, I want to go through and listen to them first, because if it's something that's relevant, if they're good, and it's still, if people can still use that information today, I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I got to take it down.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. Any sense at all. So where do you want to see the podcast go? I mean, I know you would like to have a MOG in Ohio and a MOG on the West Coast and all that, but
I don't know. I think just I just like to see it keep growing at the pace it's growing. Right now, it's comfortable, and I hope people are enjoying it. One of the things that
I am,
because a lot of the people that come on are obviously artists and creative, is I'm getting a lot of people like really sharing things that I don't think that they would typically share outside of song. I posted about this the other day where there's that movie Elvis where it's like, if you can't say it or it's too dangerous to say, sing it.
Okay.
And I love that quote. I was at a movie theater and watching the previews, and I heard that quote, and I was like, this is awesome, because that's what people are doing.
Right.
These songs that they're singing, they're telling me what they're about, and sometimes getting to the point where they're almost crying.
Wow.
And it's like, wow, man. And that's so important for their fans or other musicians to hear.
Yeah.
Or they're coming in and sharing like things that other artists deal with but nobody talks about. Things like imposter syndrome. They feel like people are going to think that they're disingenuous, that they're not the real deal and they're just being open about it. And having that conversation is got to be awesome for other artists. It's awesome for me because I'm like, I thought I was the one who thought this, No,
that's great. And that's, God, when you mentioned the crying part, because especially for songs, there's always one artist I think of, and I'm showing my age here now, but every time he sang this one song, he literally cried during it. And that was Johnny Ray, the song Cry. He just put the emotion behind it. But I've had guests on here where I've had to have tissues.
Yeah.
Not just for them, but for me, they brought me to tears.
Yeah.
Especially Rage Against Addiction. It's like,
yeah.
Guys, stop. You're making me cry.
You're killing me over here.
But it's
important, though.
Yeah. And I did one with, Rachel from Rage Against Addiction.
If I saw her, probably.
Okay. So
same with all the other people you brought up today.
Yeah. So I had her and her mother on for one episode, and it just so happened that episode fell on Valentine's Day. And it was I think it was titled something like A Mother's Love for Her Daughter in Recovery. Dude, the most downloads in one day of one episode was that particular episode. I mean, I was floored.
That's awesome.
I looked out, I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it had to do with the title and just the day that it fell. Because I'll go back to some episodes from a year or 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And for some strange reason, the downloads on them have gone sky high, a lot more. And I just know people are going through and finding those old episodes.
That's what it is, yeah.
Which is good.
I would say that just be aware of the impact that you're actually having, because there's so many people that come onto the show and they're so grateful. One guy, before we even got started, he's like, I heard the intro you did for me, because I always do the intro in advance. Right. And he's like, I realized I am somebody. Before that, he'd never been on a podcast. He didn't really feel like anybody recognized anything he did. And that's really, really important.
Yeah.
So just be aware of how important it is for other people that you're doing it.
Yeah, I think that's I love doing those intros.
Yeah.
Before and talking about them. But you're right. A lot of people.
How many people have come on and said, I've never done anything like this before?
Oh, my God.
It's everybody.
I can't tell you.
That's why they're nervous, because they don't know what to expect.
Yeah. And you just, they feel at ease. And that's,
You put them at ease. You do a good job.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And one of the things I started doing, I didn't do it with you because you're a professional at it. But I have to do this with some of the guests. I'll hit record and won't let them know. Because we'll just sit here and we're talking. And, then by the time, next thing they know, it's an hour or whatever.
Right.
And they're like, "We going to start?" I said, "We're already finished. I've already recorded everything." Really? So, but that's that natural aspect of it too. But yeah, I mean, you're right. A lot of people, God, I had a guy on my other podcast, Lifetime Oath. He's Marine, but oh my God, he was talking about the veterans and all this, and I mean, just tearing up. So emotional and everything, and you could. His voice was getting louder. Now he was in California, and of course I was here, so he was on his phone. But oh my God, when that one that just floored me. And you're right. A lot of people just come on in, and I'm sure with you it's the same way. They're just floored. They don't realize how easy it is. Now, how many times have you gotten people on that said, "Oh," or you try to get them on, they don't want to. I don't like the way my voice sounds.
I haven't had that yet.
No,
I haven't had that yet. And one of the cool things is
most of them are singers too. So,
well, that's true.
Yeah.
But I haven't had anybody say or bring their ego into the show. Everybody's left it at the door.
Right.
So I've wondered why that is. One thing is, I don't know if your ego is really going to translate too well just in an audio format, but I also think it's the hosts themselves. People will come in all the time and be like, "Can I cuss on your show?" And I'm like, "You can do whatever you want. I'm probably not going to, just out of respect for the sponsors." And
right.
But even I will drop a
right, yeah,
a little bit here and there. But because of that, the tone that you set becomes the tone for the show. They're not going to cuss because you're not cussing. They're not going to have an ego if you don't have an ego. If you come at them with a bunch of ego, yeah, they're going to start like puffing up like a puffer fish. But yeah, so to be a good host, just be completely unassuming, and you set the tone for sure.
All right, so with authors, because you get a lot of authors on.
I do,
and I've had a lot of authors on. I use the Larry King method. Don't know if you know what that is.
I don't.
Okay.
See, I can learn something right now.
Larry King always had authors on his show. He never read their books before they came on.
Okay.
And I don't do it either. Now, I didn't know this until after I did
You tell me
episodes.
what it's about. And then,
right.
Yeah.
You're selling me on the book. Do you do the same thing, or do you actually read the book first?
I'll usually read like a chapter to get a feel for their writing. But typically, yeah, it's like, what's your writing process? What inspired you to write this book? What are some of the takeaways? Like, you're asking questions that like are leading them to give you the answers,
right?
Which hopefully piggyback onto more questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess it is the Larry King method.
Yeah. When I heard of Larry King doing that, I'm like, oh, okay, good. I'm not the only one.
Right. So, you can't read every book or listen to every single song.
Time. I recorded 3 to 6 episodes a week. It's kind of hard for me to read a book.
Right.
Now, you just brought up something very interesting. So anybody that's new into podcasting, wanting to get into podcasting, needs to know this. The foul language. And on Lifetime Oath, we do it. When you got a bunch of police officers, veterans, jarheads, whatever, sitting around the table, it's
sure
they ain't gonna wash their mouth. That's why it says unfiltered. But if there is, and yes, you can do it on podcasting, but one very important thing, and depending on who you host it with, I know Buzzsprout has it, you have to check that box that says explicit. If you do not, and Apple, because yes, Apple will go through and screen these podcasts every once in a while. If Apple sees that you don't have that checked and they hear cussing on it can even be one episode, they will take your podcast down.
The entire podcast.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that now, which is one of the reasons I don't do it on this podcast.
With Apple, I believe before you can get set up with Apple, you have to tell them whether it's explicit or not.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a box you can check.
And because I noticed that my podcast, I don't think that I put that it was explicit. I think that their crawlers realized it was explicit and they just labeled it explicit.
They did.
They did it for me. They didn't take the podcast down now, but I don't recall checking that box because in the very beginning I was very, very mindful of it, and I would put beeps in as a joke.
Yeah.
But then I loosened up a little bit, but then I noticed that if you look at the listing, it says explicit.
Apple may have changed it then because they've been.
I think they'd probably
going
warn
through
you
a
or
lot of
something.
changes.
I mean, it would be nothing for them to just click the box instead of taking the content down, because that would hurt them too. To take all that content down,
Depending on who it was, yeah. It's
So now I just put explicit, but yes.
Yeah, I now for this one,
not explicit,
I don't do it. I'll put the beeps in there only because, I've had kids on the podcast.
Sure.
I'm not going to put explicit warnings if I have kids on it.
That's true. Yeah.
But like I said, the other one I do, but not this one. Something we do got to do though, and we talked about this the last time, and then you decided to go and start your own podcast, which was a good move. And I know if your schedule, it's hard.
It is.
We have to do a podcast together. You mentioned it when you came in.
I didn't think I was coming to do a podcast today. I thought I was coming to
catch up with you, man.
I thought I was co-hosting. I thought it was gonna be like that long table. There was gonna be like 6 of us sitting there. I had no idea what to expect. So now you got another episode out of it. But I'd love to co-host. It's just I'm a 9-to-5er. I know. It is tough.
Well, how many? You get what? Summer and spring is when you get breaks, more or less.
Well, I'm on spring break right now. Yeah, I get a winter break and a spring break, which is amazing. People that never worked in the college world would just be floored. Like I came from the Baltimore Sun.
Right.
You were lucky to get off at noon on Christmas Eve. You were back on the 26th.
Yeah.
At the college, like take 10 days off. You know what I mean?
You don't get summer off, just winter and spring.
Yeah, no, you get winter and spring. There's a week break that you get, and then you get vacation time too.
Okay.
But we have events during the summer, so we obviously have to be there. But yeah, but we get 2 or 3 weeks of vacation. You got your 2 weeks here. It's so nice.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
But we can catch up during one of those breaks.
Yeah, definitely. So for those of you listening, a few things I'm hoping that you got from this podcast episode. Number one, the store at Hartford Community College needs to get a pint glass.
Yes.
With the Fighting Out on there. Number two, if you want to get into podcasting, or if you are podcasting and you're looking to monetize it, don't be afraid to go out there, pitch the idea to look for sponsors first. The reason Brad and I were able to do it, Brad does marketing. He worked at the Sun.
Yep.
I worked in radio, and to us it came pretty easy. But
just being a salesperson.
Yeah. And if you're not a salesperson, learn how to become one.
Yeah, that's
in all honesty, learn how to become one. And number three, listen to the Mog. Listen to Mouthful of Graffiti, especially if you love music. Just the arts in general. You have to listen to it. It's an awesome podcast. And I'm going to kick another idea around to you when we're done that I thought about. Actually, I'm going to do it, but with your background, I'll let you know. So,
okay.
Brad, thanks a lot again, brother, man. It was great seeing you, man.
Rich, always good to see you.
Last time I saw you was at the
book
artist
signing.
show.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and Lisa ran from me.
Did she really?
I don't know.
You had the MOGfather shirt on.
Oh, I did. Did you get one yet?
No, I want one though.
You got to get one, man.
Yeah, that's
the
great.
The MOGfather.
Oh, there you go.
I want to thank the MOGfather, Brad Cox. That's my new nickname for him, the MOGfather. But I want to thank Brad again for coming on, and hopefully you all got something out of that, especially those of you that want to get into podcasting or that are podcasting. Those of you that are thinking about trademarking something, the experience that Brad went through, hopefully you learned something from that. So at the end of each episode, as I said, I like to recommend a podcast. Well, of course, I'm recommending Brad's, the Mouthful of Graffiti podcast, the Mog. You have to check it out. You can actually find it on the Chesapeake Podcast Network. Just go to ChesapeakePodcastNetwork.com. And I'm sure if you search Spotify, Apple, whatever platform you use to listen to it on, you'll be able to find it on there. So give it a listen. you'll love it. I listen to it all the time. It's a great podcast. So check it out. Again, it's Mouthful of Graffiti, the Mog. Also, if you would like to come on to the podcast, if you know anybody that would like to come on, just email me, rbennett@harfordcountyliving.com, and I'll do my best to get them on. Or if you want to come on, I'll do my best to get you on as well. It's easy. It's comfortable. I guarantee you, if you're nervous, you won't be nervous. It's very simple to do. I don't care if you're in a business. I don't care if you're a nonprofit. I don't care what you may be unemployed and not doing anything, but everybody's got a story to tell. And what better way to tell it than to sit down and have a conversation about it? So until next time, I want to thank you so much for listening. And my name is Rich Bennett. Thanks for being part of the conversation.